Thank you all very much for joining us today. So good afternoon and welcome to the final webinar of 2020 from the Centre for the New Midlands, 2021, the year for revival. So my name is Chris Smith and I'm the Managing Director of the Centre for the New Midlands, which is the Midlands' only truly independent think tank, dedicated to building a better region through the creation of new ideas. It's an honour to be welcoming such a distinguished panel for today's session, and may I take this opportunity to thank all of our guests for giving up their time to be with us today. It's a pleasure to be welcoming Andy Street, the Mayor of the West Midlands, Martin Sutherland, the CEO of Coventry City of Culture Trust, Justine Howl, Head of Communications at Birmingham Airport, and Alexander Newport, the CEO of Bradford Estates, who have most generously sponsored today's session as well. I would also like to, of course, extend a huge welcome to our President, Professor Majid AlSadi. It's great to have you all with us today. I just thought I'd just say a few words about our sponsors as well. Bradford Estates is an historic landed estates business centred around a 12,000 acre ownership on the edge of the West Midlands, providing agriculture, commercial, residential and leisure properties alongside farming and forestry businesses. The estates are promoting a new strategic garden settlement around junction 3 of the M54, comprising of up to 4 million square foot of employment space, 3,000 homes and social infrastructure, including schools, a healthcare facility and extensive public parks, designed around a zero carbon vision. A huge thank you to Alexander and his team for making today possible. So just on to today's session, the first half will feature our panelists who will share their experiences of what has been clearly an incredibly challenging year and what they hope that 2021 will bring. So the second half of the session will provide us all with a networking opportunity, in case you'd all forgotten what that was like, to meet other senior leaders from across the West Midlands, to reflect on the year, but crucially, to share ambitions for the future. There'll be a number of breakout rooms that we set up and guests will be allocated into each of the rooms. Please note that the rooms aren't going to be moderated per se or chaired, so we would ask that you are, of course, courteous to other attendees and provide everyone with the opportunity to speak as well. Guests will have 20 minutes in the breakout rooms just to discuss, as I say, what they hope 2021 will bring before we close the event and bring everyone back here into the main room as well. We do hope that you make some new connections and are able to look forward to 2021 with renewed positivity. The chat feature is on as well, so if you have any questions that you wish to pose to our panelists, then please pop them into the chat feature and we'll try and ask as many as we can. I'm extremely conscious of today's announcements from the Health Secretary, as I suspect a couple of the panelists are in particular, which will prompt strong feelings and raise various questions. However, we are going to keep these questions absolutely to a minimum. We're not expecting any fire alarms today, and I sincerely hope that you know where the toilets are, should you require them as we go. I would now like to introduce Professor Majid AlSadi, who's the President of the Centre for the New Midlands, to say a few words as words of welcome. It's an honour to welcome Majid as our inaugural President. He's a truly inspirational individual with strong links to the region. Majid is a highly successful entrepreneur and philanthropist who has transformed the lives of thousands through his endeavours. I've had the absolute privilege of knowing and working with Majid for over 10 years, would you believe, Majid? And look forward to working with him for another 10, whether or not he likes it or not. It's a huge pleasure to have you on board, Professor AlSadi. And if I can introduce you now, thank you, just to say a few words from us. Thank you. You may need to unmute, Majid, just so you know.
Thank you, Chris. I'm delighted to be here for this special event for the Centre of the West Midlands, the new Midlands, if you like, and it's a particular honour to be welcoming the Mayor of the West Midlands, Mr. Andy Street, to this event, as well as with other distinguished speakers, Justin, Martin, and Alexander. In January this year, and what a year it was, I was asked by Chris to be a president for a new organization which she was going to launch, called the Center for the New Midland. Knowing Chris and working with him for the last over 10 years actually, knowing his ideas and passion for creating life, wealth, care for the needy people, particularly when we worked with charitable organization and charitable projects across the UK and over to the Middle East in a very important project like the Changing Life program, the entrepreneurship fund program, the scholarship program for the needy students who study at Coventry University. My relation with the Midlands, it goes back to 40 years. I've been interrupted by a call. So I accepted the nomination gladly, and in the hope that I will be adding some value into Chris's thought and organization. The one big constant which remained with regard to this project is the founding mission of the think tank to create new ideas, build a better region. The project was important at the beginning of the year, but even more important now, particularly with the aftermath of the coronavirus, the need to rebuild society, industry, businesses, people who've been affected by this evil virus. And most importantly is to rebuild hope for the people of the Midland area. I am proud of my link, particularly with the Midland, having studied there since 1980, sounds like 200 years ago now. And in Birmingham, then I moved to Coventry, and almost 15 years of my life has been spent in the wonderful, as always, fond of the Midlands area. I learned my first businesses in the Midland area where I was studying for my PhD, and I started a business of selling designer clothes to the region as a distributor. And I was selling to my colleagues, friends, teachers, everybody at the university, at the student union, pubs as well. The market, the Sunday market at Coventry and Birmingham. So I was quite popular then with the wholesalers. I remember spending many beautiful nights out in Birmingham and Hagley Road and the clubs at Hagley Road, and also at Coventry, a place called Park Lane. They used to be called discos then. I don't know what they call them now. And also the Belfry Hotel, Leamington Spa, Warwick, Stoke, the whole area. I had a wonderful time and wonderful memories, and I still have a lot of friends actually still live there. I remember with a great affection the time I spent in the Midland, which helped me to be where I am and who I am today. The West Midlands is also where my two sons studied at Coventry University and graduated from Coventry. I'm proud to be the recipient of an honorary PhD degree from Coventry University for my humanitarian work, which I did with the university, with Chris then. And I still enjoy the membership of the board of advisors to the university, where we meet 4 or 5 times a year to discuss ways to help the university to achieve and to be where it is today. I remember when I joined the university advisory board in 2006, It was number 84 in the chart of universities in the UK. Coventry today enjoys number 12 of the chart, which is a great achievement and hard work from everyone in the team at the university. Before we start the session, may I take this opportunity to announce and officially launch a program called Reimagining the Region, a regional network group for forward-thinking businesses across the Midland, for those who believes in the importance of building a better region, a better life for people who lives in the area. The group is open for all, actually, businesses, universities, charitable organizations, who firmly believes in ensuring that the West Midlands have a strong voice nationally, discussing challenging issues, debate it, and find a solution to enhance the area and the people who lives in that area. So this is officially opening. We are building a strong network and would be happy and delighted for everyone to join us in this initiative. In today's session, we will be discussing the aftermath of COVID-19. The panelists will be presenting their experiences during this horrible year, and also the hope for a better 2021. We all been touched by the coronavirus, whether through tragic loss of loved ones, the lockdown itself, the loss of businesses, opportunities, limitation of movement and travel. All means of a normal life is being lost. So there is a dramatic change within the society, and people thinking business, thinking calculation of businesses and feasibility studies. Our panelists today will spend a little time reflecting on 2020 before looking ahead for the future and hopefully for a better year. Without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome Andy Street, the Mayor of the West Midlands, as our first speaker. We are thrilled to have you with us, Andy. And on behalf of the council, its members and management, I would like to thank you and thank the whole team who works with you for steering the region through this difficult and incredibly difficult time, and wish you all the best, and hopefully you get us out of the trouble so we could do business and create life and create jobs for everybody. Thank you very much indeed, and I'll leave the podium to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Majid. Lovely to hear that introduction. Thank you. And first, I should, of course, also thank Chris for bringing us together and to congratulate you on your new Midlands-based think tank with a lovely title as well. So let's hope we can live up to that in the next 20 minutes or so. So what I've been asked to do is to just give some reflections on 2020 and hopes for 2021. I'm going to keep it relatively simple and make it one or two personal observations, because I thought, you know, a week to go to Christmas, we don't want the driest of things. So let's try to pull out one or two sort of personal reflections as well. So the year, of course, has been dominated by COVID. And my first experience of COVID was in January of this year. And I remember it as though it was yesterday, where the Director of Public Health for the West Midlands telephoned me and said, Andy, we may have a problem, Houston. And she said to me, there's a possibility that this new virus will stay in China and all will be well. Or it will, I remember this phrase, or it will break out and then we have a different situation. So Sue, you put that choice on the table in January. We all know the way that it went, but I think probably that was the most portentous telephone call I took in the whole of the year. And of course, we know what's happened. But we carried on, didn't we? in January and February. And I have next to call out a high point of the year, because I think we will look back on this as really significant, because it was in the second week of February that the Prime Minister came to Birmingham to confirm that HS2 was definitely going ahead. And so many of us had battled for so many years to get that to happen. It was genuinely a really upbeat day for the region. And 2 days after, of course, the National Infrastructure Commission produced their latest report on what might or might not happen with HS2. I think it is incredible that we are pressing on, diggers in the ground, jobs being created for the first leg of HS2. And I'm convinced about when we talk about the recovery, which we will come to, that decision back in February was absolutely critical. And being very honest, thank goodness it was taken a month before the pandemic really hit, because who knows what would have happened had it not been. The actual notice to proceed, the formal instructions of the contractors, occurred while the Prime Minister was actually off work, and it was some of his team who pressed on with that. So thank goodness for that. We all know that then there was a sort of firm press on the brakes. And I'll just tell you my personal story of that again. Myself and indeed Beverly Nielsen, who I think is on the call, were expecting to have a little election in May. And it was the 12th of March that I was actually at an event with the Prime Minister in London. And we bumped into one another in the gents, if that doesn't sound terrible. And he said to me, whispered to me as we were washing our hands, Andy, I'm going to have to cancel your election tomorrow. And I said, well, I sort of knew this was coming. And of course, it's the right thing to do. But I will just admit to colleagues that, like so many others on the call, I suspect that was the moment for me that I had to think, replan this year. You've been in your plans and you think, what am I going to do instead? And I sat down in a McDonald's, McDonald's in Stourbridge the next Saturday morning with my campaign team. And I said, right, we're reprogramming, and it's hard for anyone to do that reprogramming. So I've been lucky. The virus has not affected me personally that much, but it has meant a reprogramming of the year. In terms of some of the things then through lockdown, I think actually the nation was incredibly impressive in its resolve through lockdown. The observance was brilliant, and there was a sort of spirit of we're coming through this. And I mention that because that's in contrast to where we are now. There was even in the darkest days, I sensed there was an optimism that we could see where this was heading, and there was a real resolve. A personal reflection, one of the lovely things about lockdown was that I live right on the canal in central Birmingham, and every day I did a run along the canal. It was a beautiful spring, and I loved seeing the changing season, really. We started off in the winter, we finished in the summer. It was genuinely beautiful to see an English canal side coming through that. We came, of course, to May the 11th. That was the time when the Prime Minister said you can begin to relax. July the 4th, restaurants, hospitality opened. And I think there was a whole sense of optimism in that period. If you look at how the West Midlands economy bounced back through those summer months, the numbers were actually very good. We were bouncing back really well, arguably better than other parts of the country. We didn't expect that, but that's what came. And it tells me there is that sort of resilience, that fire in the belly there still to come. And of course, we saw some incredible work by community groups, voluntary groups, faith groups. And one of the things I've learned about this pandemic is just how critical they are to the fabric, the structures in society. And one of the exam questions for us is how do we make sure they continue after the pandemic to play all the role that they've played now. But some brilliant stories of new groups coming together. The CA set up a website where people could go in, find out what was available, get involved in things. Over 500 groups, and there was a period in April, May where they were growing every day, the number on there. Really very, very humbling. But then, of course, we come to the autumn, and that was the toughest of times, I think, psychologically. One real high point in the autumn, and again, credit, I was lucky to go around a huge school in Smethwick on the second day after it opened in September, and just the plans that had been made, the resolve of the education sector, truly brilliant, actually, and all credit to them. But it's been a desperately tough time for so many businesses. The false dawns and of course energy optimism has to some extent been sapped away through this period, and the numbers for the economy have become pretty critical and gruesome. So if we look to, and of course, sorry, we all know we've seen the tiering decision today, which as yet offers no respite. So being entirely honest about it, we will all love a personal reflection time at Christmas. Everyone's got, of course, to use their personal judgments. But as we go into next year, we know we face an enormous economic challenge. There's no gilding that at all. It's enormous. 200,000 people claiming benefits across the West Midlands, a doubling since March. That's the challenge. So what are we going to do to come through that? Well, of course, the hope comes from the vaccination. You all know that, but it will come to an end eventually, and we have to remember. And then I would call out 4 things we've got to think about as we come up the other side, which hopefully will stimulate some debate. Firstly, this enormous challenge of retraining. All of those people who have got to think about how do we get them back into work, probably with new skills, and it needs a massive, unprecedented national effort around that retraining. We've got some great outbreaks of that in the Midlands, but frankly, not enough. And of course, we've got to think about the greening of our economy. Everybody says that, but it's actually got to be made a reality. And there's some wonderful opportunities for us to do that in a really hard-nosed way in the West Midlands. And the best example of all, of course, is the electrification of our automotive industry, the sort of poster child of West Midlands business. And if you want optimism, go and look at the battery centre in Coventry. I was there on Wednesday just to see what's happening there. And of course, we've got the bid for the Gigafactory. The money's now on the table. It's a must win for the West Midlands. And that will spur us forward to the next generation of technology there. And then also being optimistic. We've all thought about the places in which we live in the course of these last 9 months. And I do think there's a real stimuli to housing redevelopment. We're doing well at that in terms of numbers in the West Midlands, more money yesterday for brownfield redevelopment, something we can be really proud of. But how that redevelopment takes place, that's an area where think tanks like this should be thinking, what's the ingenuity going into that, the whole sort of sustainable housing piece there. And then, of course, there's the technology. And one thing I am, again, really optimistic about, our win 2 years ago to be the 5G testbed, to finish on something incredibly upbeat. Also in Coventry University, I thought I must come back to that for Majid. So I thought I'll choose an example. I was there on Tuesday, and we were looking at how 5G was being used to link doctor surgeries to actually care homes. And not just theory, a trial in Coventry and in Dudley of that actually happening. And I saw an examination of a resident of a care home over 5G technology, and the doctor had a perfect heartbeat image. And I thought to myself, when we won that competition a couple of years ago, that's what this is about, giving brilliant care, improving the efficiency of the NHS, technology based here in the West Midlands. So however tough it's been, there are some reasons really to be very optimistic as we go into the next year. And I've got no question that we will actually come through it really on the rebound, because we've got that great entrepreneurial spirit that was leading us to a very dynamic economy before March. And I'm sure we can rekindle that. Thanks very much indeed, Chris.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much for your inspiring words, Andy. And again, on behalf of the Centre for the New Midlands, thank you for everything, all the work that you and your team have done. So we've had some questions come in.
Good.
So first of all, from Carol, do you see the housing renewal including social housing?
Yes, categorically yes. Let's just be clear though, the CA's role is not to build social housing. That remains an LA role or other organisations. We are not taking that on directly ourselves. What we are doing directly ourselves is ensuring that the wider definition of affordable housing is driven really hugely. So we've now got ourselves an absolute minimum of any, on any scheme the CA contributes to, of 20% must be affordable homes. I've got a number of examples where a local authority gave planning permission with less than 20%. And because they want our funding, they've had to increase the percentage to over 20. Last year we achieved 21, probably blindingly obvious that that would be the case, but it is actually being done. It's not just words. And we've also, and this is really important, we've also moved the definition of affordable housing uniquely in the West Midlands. The national definition relates to market prices. Actually, that's not what drives affordability. We are relating it to incomes. So if people's incomes are flat, affordability stays flat. So yeah, in that sense, we're absolutely engaging in those issues, but the delivery of social housing, we're not stepping into that ourselves, Carol.
Another question this time. Thank you, Andy. This is from Catherine. What's your proudest moment this year?
That's an impossible question. I suppose, I think some of you will think this is an unimaginative answer, But it was actually, I think, when the Prime Minister said, yeah, I am going to build HS2, because you will all know that that was absolutely in the balance. Some will probably say I did the wrong thing. But I think I genuinely played a role in persuading him and getting the government to commit a very large sum of money. It leads a number of people to say when they see me, you're the person who cost the government X billion pounds. But you know, this job is about championing the West Midlands. I believe that that was critical to our future, and I think there is clear evidence that my role led to that. If you want something else, something that brought a very sort of different sort of tear to the eye almost, the film that the cultural sector did around for the cultural response unit did about how that sector would bounce back. That was very different, very emotional. It was lovely. It made you proud to be a person from the Midlands there. So you can take different examples for that.
Thank you. Charles has asked, during the pandemic, the critical people have been key workers like nurses, care workers, community supports being provided by community organisations, social enterprises and voluntary groups and charities, sectors that have suffered most from austerity, but essential when it was really needed. So do you think it's time for a complete rethink of our economic model and our priorities?
Well, in a sense, I touched on this in what I said. I fully acknowledge, and you've put it better, Charles, in terms of how different organisations all came together. So I acknowledge that entirely. And what I said, and I saw there was a question flash across the screen about social enterprises, we have got to find a way that those organisations that we called upon are valued going forward and are better funded than they have been. I do want, though, and I'll probably get booed by some of you for saying this, I do want to be really clear, though, that some of our success before the pandemic was actually due to dynamic companies, to conventional companies doing brilliant things. And how we plot our way forward in the future must not, erase that importance. And just to give you a brilliant example of that at the moment, I think the investment that's come from Bruntwood SciTech, over 200 million for the health and life sciences sector in South Birmingham, that is another thing that happened this year that in 10 years' time we'll look back upon as a really outstanding moment. And we would be so wrong not to value the conventional company that makes that type of investment as well. Bruntwood would say I'm cheeky calling them conventional, but you will get the point. So please, I don't want us to jettison some of what actually has brought us incredible success. And through this year, there are even some good examples of that.
Just a couple of final questions, Andy, because I'm conscious you're very pushed for time.
And you've got other speakers, more importantly.
And other speakers, of course. What's your role in, what are your thoughts around the Birmingham Commonwealth Games and its broader implications for the sort of regional development outside of Birmingham?
Yeah, so whether it be Martin's City of Culture, which you're going to hear about in a minute, or Commonwealth Games, one of the reasons I'm always the optimist is that we've got these two fantastic, I call them regional events, but they're really national, if not international events. When we won them in 2017, we knew it was important, but this is even more important now on the rebound. The story of the Commonwealth Games is that we are on target. It will happen in July 2022, despite all the setbacks with COVID, with the construction works, but it will happen. And it will still be an opportunity to showcase brilliant sport, a fantastic sort of presentation of what the West Midlands is in terms of a place to host and welcome people, and a showcase for West Midlands businesses. We've won separate funding for that to do a sort of regional expo, taking that story all around the world. So, Chris, it couldn't be a better timed opportunity for us.
Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. It really is, we're absolutely honoured to have you with us. So a huge thank you again on behalf of the Centre for the New Midlands. And may I wish you and your family a very happy Christmas and a slightly more predictable 2021.
Let's hope so. And good luck for the rest of your event today. Thank you very much for including me. Bye-bye.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome our three other panelists today. So we have Martin Sutherland. If I can just track down Martin, there we are. Fantastic, thank you. And we also have Justine, and we also have Alexander. So huge welcome to you all. There we go. So as I say, please do feel free to ask any of our panelists questions at the end of their first session. As I say, the first part of the session will be looking at, our panelists will be sharing their experiences of 2020. So without further ado, over to you, Martin, to set us off. So thank you, Martin.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the invite, and thanks for joining us today. So I'm Martin Sutherland. I'm the Chief Executive of Coventry City of Culture Trust. For those who are not aware, in 2017, Coventry was announced to be the next UK City of Culture. This is a designation that is awarded every 4 years by government following a very competitive process. The city was designated back in 2017, December 2017, that we would be the next UK City of Culture. Now, the title for City of Culture runs for 12 months, and Coventry was due to be the UK City of Culture from January 2021. This unlocks a £40 million programme, and indeed a further £100 million being invested into public realm and infrastructure. And of course, it provides an enormous opportunity to shift perceptions of the city, create new opportunities, provide platforms for the seldom heard, showcase green and digital innovation, and of course contribute towards the short-term and hopefully the longer-term prosperity of the city. During the year of 2020, I of course continued to lead the team to try and deliver plans for 2021 and critically looking at our longer-term legacy plans. Of course, all of that is all fine and academic, and then we hit a pandemic. And that the moment in lockdown essentially gave us a chance to pause, reflect, and say, well, actually, what is our purpose? And our purpose actually remained fixed. We absolutely remain focused on ensuring that 2021 makes this longer term impact, but an impact which straddles economic, social, well-being, and health outcomes as well for the city and the region. But we also recognise that our colleagues across the cultural sector, the wider culture and creative industry sector, took an absolute battering, a battering greater than we did actually as an organisation. So the wider cultural sector, the freelancers who are so critical to the vitality of our sector, and indeed the wider hospitality and nighttime economy, basically stopped. So when the first lockdown happened, we had to take quick action, reimagine what we were going to be doing as part of that. But critically, we also wanted to say, well, how do we respond? How do we pivot to shore up the cultural sector that we are going to be so dependent on to deliver for 2021? So we developed small grant programs. We filled in some gaps where government funding was seriously lacking, particularly within freelancers, and actually still remains critically lacking in terms of support for freelancers. We created other grant funds. We moved some of our activity online. My team joined the National Freelance Task Force. We also joined the city's Operation Shield programme to basically working from home, to be part of a call centre to help the kind of most vulnerable in the city. And then we undertook scenario planning. Critically, that scenario planning was a way for us to identify the least bad option. An option that would allow us to deliver as many promises as possible that were made during the bidding process, but recognising that it is now impossible, or was looking to be impossible, that we could deliver mass participation, large-scale public events as was originally imagined. For our partners within the cultural sector, income had dried up overnight, and their ability to participate, absolutely was in doubt. And so again, our investment, our activities had to be focused on how do we boost them during this period. So a big bit of 2020 has been about how do we support local sector to be ready and able to participate in 2021. As well as confidence being challenged within the cultural sector, of course, the tourism and travel market just dried up, plummeted, and therefore confidence in coming to Coventry in 2021 has been massively impacted in this as well. The capital programmes, which you see huge amount of investment in public realm, in the arts infrastructure as well as travel infrastructure, all seized temporarily, pretty much now back on track, but all seized for a critical period of time, which meant actually the city was not going to be ready to welcome 2.5 million visitors in January 2021. And for me, most importantly and most worryingly, all of our community engagement activity, which relies on us being in schools, in faith spaces, in shopping centres, in public spaces, in parks, working with our communities, all of that had to stop. Some of it shifted online, but moving it online does not replace the face-to-face interaction, the mass engagement that was so central to our success. So all of that was impacted by COVID. But overall, uncertainty prevails and continues to prevail in so many ways. But we got focused on scenario planning which gave us an opportunity to bring some certainty to our wider network, to our wider partners. And through that process, we reviewed our outcomes, our priorities, of course, our budgets, and indeed the capacity and capability of our partners to participate. And so we now have committed that we will still deliver 12 months of activity. That activity will start from May 2021. I absolutely would not be here if we were starting in 2 weeks' time. So I've been giving myself a little bit of grace, but we're definitely starting in May 2021. And so giving certainty. We know, though, that things will mean we have to continue to adapt. We'll continue to learn. I guess one of the questions I was asked to reflect on today is, what have we learned during this period? And I guess what I've learned is that by being a values-led organisation, an organisation that is focused on being collaborative, being caring, being ambitious, and supporting activism, that has carried us through. That's allowed us to remain focused on the big picture. It's enabled us to remain focused on what our outcomes need to be from this. I guess what it has allowed us to do is to continue to build a team who are strongly focused on making long-term change. And that team are continuing to grow. That's one of the benefits of executive culture is during this year, despite all the challenges everyone else has been having, we've still been able to recruit. We've still been able to expand our team, still being able to employ people from across the city and the region to join our team, to build towards a programme for 2021, which we hope will deliver so many of the promises that were made during the bidding process. But that's the next bit. I'm told to talk about kind of optimism, what comes next in our next section. So I'll leave you there just with a kind of thought that actually challenging year for us as an organisation, much more challenging for the wider culture and creative industry sector, and our responsibility to support them through this piece has become sharpened and actually becomes the focus of what happens beyond 2022. So I'll pause there for a moment.
Over to you, Justine.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. As Chris says, my name is Justine Howl. I'm the Head of Communications for Birmingham Airport. I've been at the airport many years, and I thought I'd seen everything with SARS and MERS and 9/11 and the ash cloud, which we're probably all very familiar with. But nothing quite compares to 2020. I just wanted to put Birmingham Airport in a bit of context for you, in case you're not aware of kind of how big we were or will be again. We are the UK's 7th largest airport and the 3rd largest outside of London. Pre-COVID, we served almost 13 million passengers a year with 40 airlines and almost 400 direct or one-stop flights globally. And we support 7,000 jobs directly on site and a further 30,000 indirectly in the region. Then along came COVID-19. And I think it's fair to say that aviation was one of the first industries to feel the impact of the coronavirus, and we'll certainly be one of the last ones to recover, no doubt. I think my section here probably should come with a public health warning, because it doesn't make very good reading. But I think you only have to look at any newspaper or switch on the telly to know the impact on aviation and travel. By mid-February, we really started to feel the impact. You'll remember that the virus was creeping across Europe. Many of those northern cities in Italy were starting to use this lockdown term, and some of the first cases in the UK were from travellers coming back from some of the ski resorts in Italy. By mid-March, the situation had escalated globally, and airlines started suspending services. Borders were closing and people just simply weren't flying anymore. So our passenger volumes were tumbling quite rapidly, and by the time the national lockdown happened in the end of March, we were handling 99% less passengers than the same period in 2019. Typically these months, May and April, we handled 30,000 passengers a day. We were seeing some days with 0 passengers and 0 flights. And those airlines that were flying still, such as Ryanair, KLM, Air France, were continuing to do so with very few passengers on board. As a business, we had 3 core priorities: protect the health, safety and well-being of our customers and our employees, keep the airport open, operational and safe, but preserve as much cash as possible, because we knew that this was not going to disappear overnight. We were in this for the long haul. We suspended our capital programme, which included work on the master plan, which had only just commenced. We were extending our departure lounge. That was shelved for the time being. We will revisit again. But that master plan looks towards the future of us handling 18 million passengers a year by 2033. That will obviously have to be reviewed again when we know how this pandemic and how the industry will come out of the pandemic. We closed the South Terminal straight away, very early on, because Flybe had only just gone as well in early March. So the year started quite grim for us anyway. And we closed the runway overnight just to, because we weren't having the services operate. But we did make the decision to stay open as an airport. We didn't close because we wanted to serve the region. We were taking a lot of military, medical, emergency flights, as well as repatriation services. You'll remember that the Home Office instructed UK nationals to come home as quickly as possible. So we had a lot of repatriation flights at that point. During the first 3 months from the onset of the pandemic, passenger volumes and by extension aviation revenues dropped by 99%. And from the middle of July, there was a recovery, albeit very, very short-lived, and that was because of all the constant changes to restrictions and the travel corridors which were implemented in July. So this meant that we never really operated at more than 15% of our capacity since March. 70% of our team were placed on furlough, 50% are still on furlough, and we've sadly had to lose about 40% of our workforce. So it's been challenging, to say the least. The biggest challenges, I think, was the initial blanket on the quarantine. So this blanket quarantine policy, which meant that everybody arriving into the UK had to self-isolate for 14 days. But we warmly welcome the travel corridor policy, which launched, like I say, in July, which exempted people from having to self-isolate for these 14 days if they were coming in from low-risk countries. But with the infection rate constantly changing globally, countries were being placed on the exemption list, being taken off the exemption list, and all that uncertainty has been really fatal for our industry. Although we know that there is an appetite to travel still, we've seen that there is a pent-up demand whenever restrictions are lifted in certain destinations. Unsurprisingly, customer confidence is therefore very, very low. It's at an all-time low, not just because of these changes, just because of the safety fears as well. And I think that might live on for some time. We've invested heavily in COVID-secure airport for our passengers and our employees, and this has ranged from very visual measures such as thermal imaging, perspex screen, which you'll see at check-in, and excuse me, as the security point, obviously PPE to protect our employees, hand sanitizer stations everywhere, face coverage are now mandatory at the airport when you're in the terminal as well. And the feedback from our customers has been really positive, and they felt a lot more safe because of these measures than what they expected to be. So in summary, 2020, overall passenger volume since March are down 90%. By the end of this calendar year, we'll have handled almost 3 million passengers. You compare that to 13 million, excuse me, last year. But 2 million of that 3 were handled in the first 3 months before lockdown. So as I mentioned right at the beginning, we do bounce back. The aviation industry is very resilient. It's unlikely that we'll see the passenger numbers that we saw prior to this really recover until 2023 or 2024. But with the new testing regime, which was launched this week, and with the vaccine rollout, we are confident that next year will be a better year.
We sincerely hope so.
Yes.
Thank you ever so much, Justine. Alexander, if I can pass over to you to look back on 2020. And you just need to unmute. There we go. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. I mean, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for the opportunity to sponsor your inaugural webinar. It's very exciting to be here and be in the company of Andy Street and Martin and Justine and Majid. just to start, really, 2020 was an important year for me because it was the first calendar year back in the Midlands, managing my family's business, Bradford Estates. I mean, my background before my return home was in UK commercial real estate investment and development, with the last 10 years spent as a partner at Quadrant, which I sort of came to about 10 years ago and developed it with two of my partners to become one of London's most respected property businesses. During my time there, we developed, or we're developing, around 1 million square feet of prime London office buildings, and actually asset managed an extensive retail portfolio of over 2 million square feet, with a few sort of Midlands names like the Gallagher Retail Park at Junction 9 the M6 near to IKEA, and Star City, which most people will be familiar with, driving west on your left at, near the M6 Junction 6. Now, just turning to the sort of initial impact of the pandemic for Bradford Estates. We were rather lucky, not judgment, I have to say, that we'd sort of pivoted to the world of remote working before COVID set in, and moved to Microsoft 365, which now includes the sort of pervasive Teams video conferencing tool. I know we're on Zoom today, but that was very helpful to at least position ourselves for remote working. In terms of any staff who didn't have laptops, we purchased them when it looked like we were going to have to send everyone home, and really everyone was ready to go and set up at home with business interruption minimized. It was more of a dilemma with our building and maintenance team, because we were trying to work out with, how to provide a safe working environment. I know the government rules allowed an exclusion for construction sites, but we really were treating that responsibility very seriously. So due to the sort of furlough scheme that came forward, and we weren't entirely clear about the health and safety position, we furloughed our building team for 6 weeks until we were comfortable with our employer responsibilities, and then brought them back to work as quickly as possible. I actually fell ill with COVID during the second half of March, having caught the virus from my first dinner with my future in-laws. They had been skiing in Austria, and who would have thought that, really? It was difficult times, those couple of weeks where I was sort of struck down. But the assistance of my estates and property directors, who had recently joined actually full time from Stratton Parker, and the government support measures really helped to minimise, my stress levels during the illness, and I think contributed to a quicker recovery, to be honest. With the economic outlook at that time clouded with uncertainty, I decided to very quickly implement emergency budgeting processes, and we reduced expenditure and started conserving cash, because we really didn't know how matters were going to turn out. Luckily, by the virtue of the sectors which we invest and operate in, these concerns were thankfully not realised. We've had minimal rent payment difficulties, and the farming and forestry industries have been relatively unaffected. A happy result also came out of the only real hardship faced by one of our tenants, and Vince Derry was unable to afford his cottage's rents because he'd been self-employed for a short while and therefore could not access the government's furlough scheme. But I managed to identify that he had a background in landscape gardening, so we offered him a contracting job in lieu of his rental arrears, and actually, by virtue of his excellent workmanship, he's now actually become a full member of our team. So that's a sort of a happy story. On sort of reflection over the year, despite the many challenges, there's also been, for me and for our business, positive outcomes from the pandemic. I think remote working through using Teams and sort of WhatsApp has sort of encouraged our team to sort of collaborate more and communicate more readily, which I think has developed a more cohesion within our organisation and a feeling of more influence in the company's direction. I think also the slowdown in the company's general activities gave me the space to devote more time to engagement with key regional stakeholders over our J3 proposals and establish a broad coalition of support for them. And ultimately we could deliver up to 9,000 new jobs, 440 million GVA, as well as an educational campus on site. And that could be potentially operated by the University of Wolverhampton have shown an interest. And it really sort of allowed me to highlight the scheme's potential, to join the West Midlands Interchange and Arden Cross at the HS2, future HS2 station as real pillars of economic development for the region. And as carbon emissions tumbled due to the lull in economic activity, I think public opinion has refocused onto a new baseline of a pursuit to zero carbon as soon as possible. And certainly Bradford Estates' ambitions to achieve net zero carbon operationally for J3 should contribute to this target and support the development of solar and electrical vehicle industries locally in the Midlands. Our recent decision also to move to sustainable methods of farming with a focus on a reduction in artificial fertilizers and sprays, alongside techniques to enhance carbon sequestration in the soil, should also contribute to this zero carbon drive. And I think all in all, the respite from constant traveling between meetings for me has given me time to pause, reflect, and plan where I'd like to position Bradford Estates for the opportunities coming out of this pandemic.
Thank you ever so much, Alexander. Thank you. In a slight change to the published schedule, Justine, if it's okay with you, I'd like to move on to to hear your thoughts about 2021 and what you hope will happen in the next year ahead.
Yeah, sure. I think much more of a positive outlook for next year. With the testing regime, which I mentioned earlier, that means that anybody arriving from a high-risk country can reduce the time needed in quarantine. We know that the period for isolation reduced to 10 days, and that was announced last week. But the testing, to have a private test by a private testing company, you can get out of quarantine, so to speak, around day 6 of arriving back into the UK. So that I think is really, really helpful for our industry and might stimulate customers traveling again. But the vaccine is really where we know that's the answer, really, don't we? We hope to see that leisure travel will return by next summer. I think we're all ready for a summer holiday. We will be, definitely. I know I will be by, now actually. But the truth is we don't really know. We don't entirely know for sure what next year looks like. We are very optimistic that it will be a good year. Even this morning, you might have seen in the news that Tenerife looks like it may be closing down for 2 weeks over Christmas because the infection rate there is high, and that is not confirmed. I seem to have developed a persistent cough. I'm sorry. I'm sure it's not. But it's so uncertain and it's so fluid at the moment. It's difficult to put numbers on what next year will look like. And different countries will have different access to the vaccine, of course, and I think there will be a reluctance to sit on an aircraft for long periods. So for long haul traffic, sitting with a mask on for up to 8 hours might not feel doable to some people, which I completely understand. So the long haul market will probably take longer to recover than the short haul in European markets. But we believe that visiting friends and relatives will come back more strongly once the restrictions are lifted. Everyone wants to go and visit their friends and relatives, particularly those that are living overseas. But we know that business travel will take longer because this thing works. What we're doing now, this virtual meetings like this, it works. So I think that business travel will take longer, and I think that people won't take that one-day business trip to Germany or France to have a meeting when you can just click on Zoom or Teams. But like I say, we do expect summer to be much better. But a bit too early to tell exactly what that looks like. What we do know is that customers may be choosing safety or be influenced by how safe they feel, and that safety and brand trust might be a higher priority than cost for some people. And also travellers are becoming more conscious citizens, so they care more about their carbon footprint. So the aviation sector and our airports will need to reduce their environmental impact for sure. For us, we've already set ourselves an ambitious target of reaching net zero by 2033. And we're looking at ways that we can do that right now, and we'll be looking at that strategy going forward, which will probably be a mix of renewables and offsetting, but we're not quite sure yet is the answer. But look, airlines invest in cities and they invest in regions, and we are part of a very successful region, and we will grow again. Our economy will become strong again, and we'll attract traffic, we'll grow, and then we'll reinvest in the airport for sure. And with all these exciting things like HS2, the Commonwealth Games, and obviously the Coventry City of Culture, I think we've got a lot to look forward to. That's quite a nice segue to Martin.
Over to you,
yes,
Martin.
Yes, let's hope so. So a date for your diary is the 15th of May 2021. That is when we open our City of Culture event, and will run for 12 months. It will include 365 days of cultural activity targeted to happen in every single ward across the city. We still absolutely remain focused on engaging 80% of our citizens in at least 3 activities during 2021. We're also hoping to welcome 2.5 million additional visitors to the city. Ambitious targets which we still think are possible. Maybe the nature of the visitors will have changed from what was originally imagined, as Justine outlines, in terms of travel challenges and confidence. But what we are doing is working really hard to give people confidence in Coventry as a destination. So still have really ambitious targets about welcoming the UK, if not the world, to Coventry in 2021. And all of this, of course, is made possible by an extraordinary partnership, a consortium of partners, whether they be local, regional and national funders, universities, lottery providers, sponsors, philanthropists, health authorities, trusts and foundations, a huge number of volunteers, and of course the cultural and creative sector, everybody working together to deliver something kind of extraordinary in these kind of really difficult times. And while, of course, the shows and the events and the nature of the activities that we undertake are inevitably going to be different, it's still going to be extraordinary. You know, we are absolutely determined to showcase the youthfulness, the diversity, the talent of our city and our region, and we intend to showcase this to a global audience. So a lot of our work will now be live streamed, it'll be broadcast, as well as being performed live within Coventry. Events, of course, will be co-created with communities right across the city to ensure that resources are more fairly distributed. And as mentioned before, you know, as a values-driven organisation, the programme will espouse those values and will support artists and organisations who seek to make longer-term change in their city. But while that all sounds very valuable, we also seek to be really joyful. We absolutely want to create a programme which is celebratory, which is fun, which positions Coventry truly as a city that moves. And this is the kind of our slogan for our year of culture: Coventry, the city that moves. A city which is a music city, a playful city, a youthful city, and indeed a digital city. And we are absolutely focused on bringing some light and some hope to the city. We've started that off with, I guess, a pre-event right now running at the cathedral. We've been able to put, despite tier 3, we've been able to put an ice rink into the cathedral ruins. It just looks absolutely spectacular. An enormous interest in it. We're selling really, really well. Super COVID safety rules in place. And I'm really kind of thrilled by the appetite from Coventrians to engage in what we're doing. So we feel confident that there is, with the right product and with the right measures in place, there's an appetite for coming together, engaging in social, leisure and cultural activity, and so we're kind of buoyed on by that. So in order to deliver our year, we do have producers who are embedded in voluntary sector organisations. We've been able to boost the capacity within the cultural sector locally, and we developed partnerships with some major national institutions as well. And at the end of January 2021, this is when we'll be launching our full programme. And I'm really hopeful, you know, having seen what is emerging, really hopeful that audiences and visitors and residents will recognise that there really is something for everyone within our programme. It's a programme that will celebrate the heritage of our city, but also point towards an optimistic and a fairer future. And through some really well-established media partnerships with the BBC, with Channel 4, with Sky Arts, we absolutely believe will be under a sustained positive spotlight. Coventry City of Culture will be the first major events programme happening anywhere in the UK next year. It's the only annual festival to happen anywhere across Europe next year. So absolutely, it's an opportunity for us to showcase the city, showcase the region, and an opportunity for businesses to take advantage of the spotlight the City of Culture will bring. We've also got to use that spotlight to ensure that the chances of our citizens are improved. And a big focus of our work, and a big focus of my work in particular, is about ensuring that investments in skills continues. I truly believe it is absolutely key to delivering a legacy from this major investment. So throughout 2021, we'll continue to invest in our apprenticeship programme, our leadership programme. We'll be recruiting 5,000 volunteers. We'll be investing in hospitality and retail sector training programmes, and ensuring that every single young person in the city has an opportunity to engage and participate in a learning opportunity linked to City of Culture, but also to be at the heart of the programming. We're also going to be revealing the results of our £100 million plus capital programme, which sees extraordinary changes to some of the capital infrastructure, the cultural infrastructure, but also public realm. There's artists have been commissioned across the city to transform what the city will look like for visitors. But also we, as a trust, will be unveiling our own capital asset. We are investing in a digital gallery, one which will showcase immersive technology in a really kind of playful and accessible way, one which establishes a new visitor attraction for the city, which will last long after 2021. But we've also got to use this opportunity to make sure that, you know, in the longer term, our resources are more fairly distributed. But we're also really fixated on ensuring that we minimise the environmental impact that mass scale events, mass gatherings can make. We've got a really well-funded from National Heritage Fund Green Futures programme, and are doing some really innovative work across the city with many major partners. But we also seek to use this as an opportunity to showcase the innovation which we all believe is so central to the region's recovery. I guess finally, I do strongly believe that the City of Culture provides a major opportunity to ensure that the culture and creative industries can be part of the region's short-term reset. But also I think this gives us an amazing opportunity to stake a claim for being part of the longer-term solution. We've been able to demonstrate through this period that kind of creativity leads to resilience, and absolutely that people have missed the ability to gather. I think this is an amazing opportunity for us as a cultural sector to reassert our importance in terms of the city and the region, its economic recovery, and definitely don't intend to blow that. I'm really optimistic, therefore, that we've got this spotlight. But I'm also pragmatic. I recognise that there's going to be more change, there's going to be much more disruption, but really, I'm ultimately really glad and feel very privileged that this opportunity exists for Coventry and Warwickshire and the wider West Midlands, because my colleagues elsewhere, whether they be in tier 1, 2 or 3, in fact, have got nothing like this opportunity, and I'm determined that we kind of galvanise, use this to truly reinvent what Coventry and Warwickshire is going to do as part of its future economy. So thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much, Martin. And now finally, just on to Alexander, who's going to finish our kind of looking forward session. And then there's a couple of questions that have popped into the chat that we'll ask the panel to address as well. And then we're going to pop into the breakout rooms, probably for about 10 minutes. So thank you all, and over to you, Alexander.
Thanks, Chris. Looking ahead to 2021, I'm most excited about the industries which are going to come forward to propel the Midlands economy and the UK into a sort of post-COVID revival. And so renewable energy, I mean, Shropshire, where I sit at the moment, I mean, I feel that could be instrumental in helping offset the West Midlands carbon account, because the county of Shropshire covers 3,500 square kilometres. It's the biggest landlocked county in England, with a population of only 500,000 people. Well, compared to the West Midlands, which is 900 square kilometres and 3 million population. Shropshire's declared a climate change emergency, and independently, the South Shropshire area has also set up a climate change action group. So awareness is growing within the local population in the county. also within the county, there's a rising number of solar farms being developed, and given its extensive land holdings are controlled by perhaps the highest concentration of landed estates and large farms in the UK, then assembling land to develop large-scale solar to feed into more densely populated urban areas should be feasible. Grid connection costs and capacity within the grid is always an obstacle. So ourselves at Bradford Estates, we've sort of explored the concept of a private line electricity connection for J3 to off-site solar farms on our own land outside the red line of about 72 hectares at a cost of around £20 million. And the benefit of utilising land for field-mounted solar panels is that the land can still be used for sort of sheep grazing, so it still can maintain agricultural use. Another industry I think that sort of is developing and in the spotlight is modern methods of construction. And I really feel that has a strong contribution to make to tackling the housing crisis in the UK by delivering more homes quickly and greenly. So what is an MMC, modern methods of construction? It's the process by which buildings are constructed off-site under controlled factory conditions using the same materials and designed to the same codes and standards as conventionally built houses, but in about half the time and more energy efficiently. Buildings are produced in modules that, when put together on site, reflect the identical design intent and specifications of conventionally built accommodation. The University of Wolverhampton has recognised the exciting future of MMC by offering a master's degree in the subject at their School of Architecture and the Built Environment. Bradford Estates has also been approached by a well-known MMC developer to establish a factory at J3 alongside a workers' village in the style of Cadbury's Bourneville or Unilever's Port Sunlight in Lancashire. Electrical vehicles, battery technology. I mean, with the government's proposals to outlaw the sale of petrol and diesel vehicles by 2030, the race is really on to develop a domestic battery manufacturing industry to secure the future of our key automotive sector in the region in the transition to electric vehicles. The development of the first electric vehicle-only forecourt has also been recently completed in Braintree in Essex, and that's powered by a combination of in-situ solar panels and batteries, and was opened just in time for Christmas. The Department of International Trade launched a nationwide inquiry this summer for sites to accommodate an initial 6 gigafactories for the automotive industry, with each facility requiring over 50 hectares of employment land with easy access to the motorway network and estimated to yield around 3,000 new jobs per facility. Shropshire Council recognised the scale of our site at J3 by putting the scheme forward to this nationally crucial call for sites. Also, we've been approached recently by an EV forecourt developer because of our land's adjacency to the M54 and key regional trunk roads of the A5 and A41, so something to consider for next year. Agricultural technology. As most agricultural crops are dependent on the global markets for their pricing, then the only real control for a producer is over the cost of production, which is also now therefore driving the forces of agricultural technology innovation. With only 10 minutes travelling time from the estates, Harper Adams University is pioneering research into sustainable methods of farming to reduce the need for fertiliser, sprays and machinery. So very lucky to have such a neighbour on our sort of doorstep. We're partnering with the university and the Innovation for Agriculture, which is a unit of the Royal Agricultural Society, to advise on the setup of a new exemplar agricultural business founded on sustainable farming principles. Through this reduction, we aim to improve the reduction in the use of fertiliser and sprays and machinery. We aim to improve the net biodiversity of our land, enhance the local watercourses, increase the nutritional content of our crops, and most importantly, sequester increasing amounts of carbon in our soils, with an aim to achieving not only net zero carbon, but eventually a positive carbon balance in our operations. As our area is home to nationally significant agricultural and food businesses, J3's employment land therefore offers the opportunity to create an agricultural technology cluster by attracting some large occupiers in these industries to our scheme to complement Harper Adams' smaller scale Newport Innovation Park further down the A41. Thanks very much, Chris.
Hopefully that's everyone back into the room now. On behalf of the Centre for the New Midlands, may I thank you all for joining us today. And please do, if you haven't already, please do register for our monthly news that we send out. You should receive that on the first Monday of every month. But again, a huge thank you to all of our panelists as well. So on behalf of the Centre for the New Midlands, may I take this opportunity to wish you all a very happy Christmas and a slightly more adventurous 2021. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.